Hello class, this is Mr. McDougall with your next project tutorial. We are going to continue talking about the exposure triangle from the previous lesson. So yesterday we did exposure triangle part 1, which was aperture. Now we are doing part 2, which is the second leg of the exposure triangle, ISO. So this lesson and the next lesson on part 3, they're all going to follow the same structure, just like we did in the previous lesson. First, I need you to watch this video, the What is ISO video by Studio Binder. As you watch it, answer the questions on this quiz. As long as you're following along, it will be very simple. And one thing I want you to keep in mind as we're talking about the exposure triangle is that there are a lot of numbers involved, setting the ISO and all these settings at specific numbers, but I don't want you to get too hung up on memorizing specific numbers or thinking that you have to do a lot of math. The only thing that I really want you to take away from this is just understanding what these settings do. So if you make settings really low, go one direction, it has an effect on the light and the image, and if you go really high to the other side, it has another effect on the light and the image. So both settings for all three of these legs of the triangles are going to be the same. Same thing with aperture that we did last time. You didn't have to memorize numbers, you just needed to know that a lower f-stop made a shallow focus and a higher f-stop made a deep focus. And they both control how much light comes in as well. So you just have to find the balance. And same thing with ISO. So again, watch this video, the What is ISO, and answer the quiz first. So pause the video you're watching right now with me and do that, and then come back to finish the rest of this. Once you've done that, we'll recap everything you just learned in the video with the presentation right here. So again, this is available for you to view. And we're talking about how ISO affects light, just like the other parts of the triangle, and something else. So these are the objectives we're going to talk about when it comes to ISO and just understanding its effects. So just like we talked about in the previous lesson, we have our three things up here you might see. That's why they're the most important. Last time we talked about aperture, which is the F number. ISO is a little more straightforward. It even has its own little icon or button where it says ISO right there. That's how you know what you're controlling. So ISO affects light, just like the other parts of the triangle, and it affects the image quality. So what that means is how sharp your image is from the detailed pixels. So it's not a physical component that moves like the aperture or the shutter. It's a digital sensor, and it determines the light sensitivity of the camera. It lets the light in, the light hits it, and it determines the image quality all digitally. It's the name comes from the International Organization of Standardization. This is an international company or organization that sets all units of measurement. So it's not just referring to photography, but anything that you use to measure, rulers, measuring cups for food, anything that is measured or calibrated needs to be globally the same. It can't be one unit of measurement in our country and then the other countries have a different unit of measurement that doesn't match. We all need to know how long a foot is or how big a cup is, and et cetera, et cetera. Same thing with ISO. We need to make sure globally that everyone's ISO is measured exactly the same. And what you want to do is keep your ISO as low as you can. You will need to change it, but when you're taking a photo, the goal is to stay as low as possible. You will have to raise it sometimes if there's not enough light, but you want to be careful raising it too high because of noise. And we'll talk about that in a second. And as the video mentioned, every camera has its own dynamic range, which is how much light it can take in and the range it has from highlights to shadows. Every camera is a little bit different. Some are better than others. You just got to get used to the camera that you have. The ones we have in class are not too bad. So again, as I mentioned, the aperture we talked about last time may seem a little confusing because the smaller f-stop meant the aperture got bigger. So that seemed like a little backwards in case that confused you. But the takeaway I wanted you to have from that is that the lower f-stop number meant less in focus. That's the correlation. That's the most important. ISO is a little more straightforward in that the higher the number, the brighter the image gets because more light is coming in and it's more sensitive. So just think of increasing the number means increasing the brightness. So again, it's very easy to keep track of this one. The lower the number, the darker the image gets. But be careful when you start cranking it up too high because we get this effect. And this is what we talked about, noise. Keeping the ISO as low as you can will help keep a smoother image. Again, we're talking about image quality here. We want the best image quality possible, and that's done with the lowest ISO. Sometimes you have no choice but to bump up your ISO as much as you can, but what happens is this: there's not enough light information hitting the sensor, and so it looks all pixelated like this because the camera is trying to determine what pixel colors go to fill in all these missing spots. So that's why we want to be careful. If you've ever taken a photo on your phone at night or in a dark room, you may notice the picture kind of looks like this. And that is because it's not getting enough light. It can't determine what the photo needs to look like. So the more light you can have, the better to keep your ISO low and have a better image overall. The only thing that we could add noise for, as it mentioned in the video, is style. If you're trying to get that vintage look or an older look, so like Saving Private Ryan was set in World War II, or this one was set in the 70s. So if you're into that kind of vintage look of a photograph or an image, then it might be helpful to add a little bit of noise later on in post when you're editing, just again purely for stylistic purposes. Typically, you want your image to be as high quality as possible, but then you can break the rules a little bit if that is your style. Okay, so back to there. Let's go back. We're going to do the same things we did in the previous assignment. So if you go back to this one that says classwork, the slides with your name and classwork, you're going to do the exact same things we did last time. We're going to take 2 pictures. The first 2 are going to be taken with that camera sim website that we used last time, and then pictures 3 and 4 you're going to take of a classmate with the classroom cameras. So for this first one, let's open up a new tab and go back to that camera sim website. You should have bookmarked it from the previous lesson. In case you did not bookmark it, go back to the aperture lesson, part 1. So go back into classwork and go to the one from before and find the link to this one right here. So just like we did before, we're going to start the sim, and you're going to see the difference in the 2 extremes of ISO. So in the classwork right here, photo number 1 and photo number 2, we're going to be in P mode for program mode. Last time we were in AV mode for aperture. This one is the ISO priority, which is P mode. So photo number 1 is going to be taken at 100 ISO. So let's do that. Go here. We are already in P mode, which is great. And ISO is already at 100, which is awesome. Again, keeping it as low as possible. Let's click snap photo. Not too bad. Remember, let's save it. So right click to download it. Save image as. I'm just going to call mine 100. Keep it simple. And then click return to viewfinder to do our second one. So number 2, the ISO is going to be 6400. Very different. The other end of the spectrum. We're going to basically crank it up as high as we can. Let's go back. P mode. Again, these are going to adjust automatically. We don't need to worry about these. So I'm going to slide this up. And you'll see as I'm sliding it, these are changing. That's the whole point of the exposure triangle, is that to get a properly exposed image, these 3 things have to be in balance. If I change one, I have to change all 3. So I'm going to crank this all the way up to here, 6400, and let's do snap photo. You can see what a huge difference. It either says not bad, but reduce your ISO a bit. Look at the image quality of this one. There's too much light sensitivity and it's coming in, so the ISO is too high and the camera is too sensitive, which is causing all this noise and digital dirt on the image right here. So this is what we want to avoid. But I wanted you to take this picture so you could see what it looks like. So let's save this one too. Right click, save image as. This one's 6400. Perfect. So those are your 2 photos. Let's upload them to the website, or to your slideshow, I mean. Click here. You can do replace image. And here's the 100. And then let's replace this image with the 6400. Right there. And again, the whole point of doing the 2 extremes is so you can see the difference in the quality of the photo. Here, pretty good quality. Here, not so much. It's really bright image quality. The sky doesn't look as good. It looks really dirty and noisy, and that's what we want to avoid. So you want to be careful when cranking your ISO up as high as you can. So on this one, same thing like the previous lesson. Now you're going to use the classroom cameras. So get a classroom camera and an SD card. Make sure you format the SD card as always. And you're going to take 2 pictures of a classmate. Just take a simple photo of them looking straight onto the camera. It doesn't have to be complicated. We'll get into that in the next one with shutter speed. But you're going to take a photo of them with your ISO at 200, and then take a second photo with your ISO at 3200. Make sure you're in P mode to double check. And again, if you get stuck, if you don't know how to change it, let me know. I will help you in class. And again, you can see the difference in quality when you take these two pictures. Okay? So have fun.